Hey guys, this is Brian over at OBEDIA, and today's tutorial is about beat mapping in Logic Pro 9. And this is going to show you how to take an audio clip and beat map it to make Logic conform to the timing of that clip, and is great for remixing and things like that. As always, if you enjoy what you see here, please join us over at OBEDIA.com. Get registered with us. We do offer new user sign-up bonuses, and if you've got any issues with your audio software or hardware, we're here to help you with them and tame your technology, which is what we do best here at OBEDIA. Get in touch with me, Brian, at OBEDIA.com, or on Twitter at twitter.com/OBEDIAtutor. Thanks, and enjoy the tutorial.
Beat mapping is the easiest and usually quickest way to get Logic to conform its tempo to that of an external audio track. And so when I say that, what I mean is that I'm going to take an audio track and I'm going to make Logic follow its tempo in order to match up my metronome, my click track, with that audio track that I import. So when you do this, you need to have in mind what audio file it is that you're going to make the sort of master tempo, essentially. So this is really good to do with drums or something like that. You could do it with an entire track if you wanted, if you were time correcting or something like that. But in the case of drums, it's really useful with drums, and that's because drums are typically, of course, that's what you're going to be listening to for your tempo. So I'm going to show you guys how to use beat mapping to do this. So the first important thing that you've got to have, of course, is a piece of audio. And I've imported some drums that I recorded a while ago, and I've got my click track turned on. I've got my metronome enabled. And when I hit play, I'm going to hear the playback, of course, and I want to listen to the click and see how it sounds in conjunction with this audio that I'm playing back. Alright, so we can hear that that is obviously not in time with the click track. And so that is not what we want nor what we need. So what we're going to do is we're going to use beat mapping to beat map this drum track that I've got and make Logic follow its tempo. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up my global tracks. And then the global tracks are always available on the top corner here of your arrange window. And I'm going to expand that, and I've got the tempo lane, and if I expand the tempo lane, this shows me the overall tempo of my project that I'm working on, and you can see it's just set to 120. Now if I make a change and I drag that, let's say up, and I go up to 133, this is going to change the tempo of the project. So you can see this changes a few things, but what this does not do is make this audio file automatically conform to the click track, and that is, again, not what I want. So using the tempo lane only is not going to be what I want to do. I want to use beat mapping. So in order to enable beat mapping, because it's not typically automatically enabled, I need to look at the View section here. I'm going to click on View, and I'm going to go to Configure Global Tracks. So now the Global Tracks configuration window opens up. And in this pane, you'll see the option for beat mapping. I'm going to click to enable beat mapping. You'll notice that the beat mapping lane has showed up now. I'm going to hit Done. So now I've got the beat mapping lane opened up, and I can give myself a little bit of room to work with here. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the drum track that I've got. And so here's the drum track, and I can see a representation of it here in the beat mapping. Now on the top of this grid, this is Logic's grid, and this is the timing that Logic has for bars and beats and things like that. On the bottom here, these are the transients as have been detected on the first try by Logic. And so what we want is for these white lines to match up with these white lines. So let me zoom in a little bit and show you guys that. These white lines down here, again, they're the transients. These are the passing parts of the audio that show us the beginning of waveforms and things like that, kicks and snares, things that really stand out on a recording. We want for these white lines to match up with these white lines. If we do that, we should have a proper tempo map. So the first thing that I can do is click on Detect. And when I first do that, if I've done this in the past, Logic is going to ask me if I'm sure that I want to overwrite the existing transients and so on and so forth. I'm going to hit OK. So then what Logic does is it takes its best guess at the transients and it does its best to line things up. But if I play this back again, it's not going to sound right. So that's not right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here and I'll show you guys. My first transient is set right here, and this is a good thing to do, is that what you want to do is you want to take your audio file and you want to make sure that it starts off on a good downbeat. If it's starting off with an ambient passage or something like that, you can make that work, but you're going to want to make sure that you start doing your beat mapping when you really start to get a hard beat happening. So that's pretty important. So I've got that right here, and so I don't need to mess with this one. I can see these are lined up. But if I skip right over to the next immediate one, obviously this is not right. So in order to fix this, I'm going to click here and I'm going to drag. And you're going to see this little yellow line appear from the top grid to the bottom. And I'm going to let go. And when I connect those two, you notice now it's moved over. Now it's moved the transient over. And now the transient is matching up with this line. So now the thing is, though, that I need to do this for all my different beats. So I'm going to click here again, I'm going to drag, and I'm going to drop. So you can notice these are starting to line up. Now, usually what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to link the two closest white lines, essentially. And what that's going to do is it's going to ensure that the transients are lining up properly. And it's going to make sure that the grid lines up properly. So this can take a while, because this really depends, of course, on what kind of audio you're working with, how on time it was originally, and things like that. But you can see as I do this, it's starting to line everything up real nicely. And that's what we like to see. We like to see transients that line up really well. And as you can see as I go along and I do this, a lot of these will get a lot closer, typically. And they might get so close that you may not have to do this to every single one. I mean, this can get obviously very tedious. But again, as I say, the more accurate you are about this, the more accurate a beat map you're going to have, and therefore the better your click and the easier your timing for dropping in loops like Apple loops or loops from a library and things like that. So this is pretty important. So I've done a good amount of these, and let's see where I'm at. Well, I'm essentially just about at the end of a 4-bar loop right here. So that's pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to listen to this. And, you know, what this is going to do is give me, and you want to work, I should also mention that you want to work typically in 4-bar loops. That's going to make things probably the easiest for you. So I'll set myself up with a 4-bar repeating loop, and I'll work just on that bit. Because if you try to get ahead of yourself, you know, you really can start to mix yourself up. So give yourself a 4-bar loop and work with that. So now I'm going to listen to this on playback, and my metronome, my click, should match up with the audio file, which will make it a lot easier for doing a lot of production that I need to do. So let's take a listen. So you can hear now things are lining up properly. That metronome is sitting right along with the drums. It's giving me a good 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's very important. And so now that I've got that, I can go along and I can beat map the rest of these drums if I need to. Now, sometimes what you can experiment with is going to the end of a passage and changing the beat mapping settings, and that'll sometimes kind of shift things into place. But you will find that depending on the audio that you're working with, you are going to have to do this and to a lot of the different transients that you've got. And it can be a bit tedious, as I say, but it will make sure that you get the best tempo map that you've got. Now, there's one other thing that I should mention, and that is you'll notice that you've got the option in your beat mapping lane for Protect MIDI. And you notice when I mouse over, it says protects the bar ruler position of MIDI events. That's an important thing. If you have a MIDI click track that you're working with, and sometimes people will make a MIDI click track instead of just using the metronome click that comes out of Logic. If you have a MIDI click track or something like that, you want to enable Protect MIDI, because what this is going to do is this is going to make sure that that MIDI stays perfectly in time, because if you start to change things using beat mapping, that MIDI will also follow along, and then your click track will just go all over the place, and you won't be able to use that MIDI click track to do what you need to do. So you do want to click Protect MIDI. So that's very important. The other things that I should mention is transients, the plus and the minus buttons. If I add transients, this will look for more transients in the audio file. If I hit the minus button, this subtracts. If I hit the minus button, this subtracts transients away from the audio file that I am working with. And what that does is that just gives me less transients to work with, which is a lot better when you're working with drums and things like that you want to be accurate on. You don't need a ton of transients. You just need to be able to see some of the transients and match them up. Now, there is also a way to have Logic automatically beatmap a piece of audio, and sometimes this will work very accurately and other times it might not be as good. But the way that we do this is by using the Beats from Region option. And Beats from Region is going to take a region of audio that we select, such as the 4-bar loop that I have selected, and it's going to find the transients and beat match based on that region that we set. So one thing that we need to do before we use Beats from Region is we need to set at least typically the first transient. And so this again comes into where I'm saying that it's a very good thing to have your audio trimmed down to the first major transient, in this case, as I say, the downbeat, beginning of the drums, something like that, or to mark that based on the region that you're going to be beat mapping. So that transient is not directly linked right now in Logic. It's been found and it's matching up okay, but I need to go ahead and tell Logic manually that this transient is set. So I'm going to click and drag and just set that first transient at the beginning here, and it's yellow now. So now that I've done that, what that's going to do is that's going to ensure that I get the most accurate beat map. Because sometimes if I don't set that and I do the beat map, I'm going to have maybe a few beats that are going to be off, and then the beat map will be proper. And that's usually how it's going to end up happening, so I can skip that by just setting that first transient. So I've set that transient, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Beats from Region. So now the Set Beats by Guide Regions dialog box comes up, and what you want to do here in note values, you want to select the note value that most closely matches the audio that you're working with. So I'm going to just select quarter notes, because pretty much these are all quarter notes that I'm working with. And then I've got two options here for algorithm: tolerate missing or additional events, and use exactly all existing events. Tolerate missing or additional events is typically what you want to use on audio, because what that's going to do is that's going to ensure that when the beat map happens, it's not going to make any large tempo jumps, really erratic tempo jumps, because you don't want that. That obviously is not going to help your production. So when you're working with audio, you want to use tolerate missing or additional events. If that doesn't matter as much, you can go with use exactly all existing events. This is also good for MIDI, because MIDI will typically be timed much more accurately than audio. But if I'm working with audio, and I am, of course, and most of the time I will be, I want to stick with the first algorithm option. So when I'm all done with that, I'm going to hit OK. And so now you notice what has happened is that Logic has beat mapped my drum loop that I've got right here. And it's made some guesses and it's moved the transients around. So if I Apple Z, I'll show you the difference. So that right there, that's without. And if I redo it, and then if I redo that, you'll notice that it changes things a lot. Now my transients are lined up. And if I play this back, this should sound like it's playing properly with the metronome. So you can hear, again, that is properly beat mapped. And if I look at the audio file as I move along it, I can see that it's pretty much on point. The transients, a lot of the transients are matching up right now. This is based on the region. So, if I go down further and I notice that it's getting off again, I can either manually set my beats. And if I do that after I've done an initial beat map, a lot of times, again, this will match up a lot of the other transients that are off. Or I can select regions and I can continue to use Beats from Region. As always, I hope that this has been useful to you guys. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them here on our video. Hit me up on my email at brian@obedia.com or find me on Twitter at twitter.com/OBEDIAtutor. Until next tutorial, take care and happy music making to you.